What do you do when you have a Calisher Terry breech-loading rifle, but you only have Enfield ammunition? Well, today we're going to investigate how you can remake an Enfield cartridge into a capping breech-loader cartridge. This is based on a historical reference that I come across for what was done here in South Australia in the 1860s and possibly elsewhere as well. Let's have a look. The minutes of the previous meeting having been read, Lieutenant Sutherland drew attention to what he thought an error in the printed conditions respecting match number 3. It was stated in the minutes that any rifle might be used carrying government ammunition. His understanding was that any rifle might enter capable of carrying the government ammunition, but that it should not be compulsory to use that ammunition, for if it were made so, the permission would be merely nominal and worthless, for the government ammunition would be of no use to breech loaders, if they were obliged to use the cartridges as supplied. He thought they should be allowed to break up the government cartridges and remake them. Colonel Blythe said if those volunteers who used Terry rifles were permitted to make up their own cartridges, they would have a decided advantage over those who were obliged to use the government ammunition as supplied on the ground. They would weigh their powder and balls to a grain, whereas the cartridges supplied by the government differed in weight. He had lately weighed some bullets and found a difference of 14 grains between two of them. Today I'm going to attempt to remake an Enfield cartridge into a Calisher Terry cartridge. This is the first time I've done this, and probably the first time this has been done since about the 1860s. So to do this, we need Enfield cartridge. It needs to be the .568 diameter Pritchard bullet, or the Hay bullet more correctly. You need a 2-inch template, a former which is 14 millimeters in diameter, a 14 millimeter diameter wax card disc such as you get from a juice or a milk bottle, that sort of thing, and a 16 millimeter diameter by 8 millimeter thick felt wad. You also need a sharp knife, something to pour the powder into, and a funnel. And I like to use 2 types of glue, the glue stick and a tacky glue. Now the glues are the only things here that are not 1860s appropriate, but they did have equivalents, so if you really want to go that way, you can make some period correct glue to go with it, but the concept is still the same. And finally, this is just a little jig that I use to hold the bullet in, which you'll see used later. It's not really necessary, but it makes life a bit easier. So the first thing we need to do is disassemble the Enfield cartridge. I'll start by simply opening it. I'll try not to tear it open, I'll just untwist it. Use the knife a bit. And I'll pour the charger powder into my little receptacle there, make sure it's all out. I'll put that aside for later. Now, the best way I think to take this apart neatly would be to cut the tied off rows from the bottom, and that should allow it to open up again. There we go. Now unwrap the cartridge, exposing the bullet and the powder cylinder. So we can discard the powder cylinder. Of course, keep the bullet to one side, we'll be needing that later. And importantly, keep the actual outer wrapper. That's the thin rag paper wrapper. Just letting out. So this has got the 3 slits in it, as it should have, but we're not going to use that part because the Terry cartridge doesn't require that. So basically all we need to do is get a 2-inch square out of this. So I'll lay my template over the uncrumpled and unslit part of the paper and cut it out. Discard those. And there we have the Terry cartridge paper. Much simpler. So, bit of glue, just about 5 millimeters of glue line along one edge, like so. Make sure you get a decent amount on there. And I'll just move the chopping board out of the way so we have a nice smooth surface to roll this tightly onto. Take the bullet and place it this time point outwards with the paper just covering the parallel portions of the bullet. And then it's really important to wrap this extremely tightly. Yep, that looks pretty good. Press the glue down and withdraw the former. So as you can see, now we have the powder cylinder, or the case of the cartridge, so to speak, tightly wrapped around the bullet. Okay, so having let the glue around the powder cylinder dry for a while, we can proceed to the final stages. Take the powder that we took out of the cartridge earlier and put it back in the cartridge, like so. Then we take the disc, the cardboard disc, place it in and just push it down. Then it's a matter of simply folding in the remaining bit of the wrapper nice and firmly, like so. So you have a cartridge that's closed off, but we still need to put the wad on the back because that's the gas seal. So taking a bit of very tacky gel type glue, just put a dab on the back there and glue it onto the back. So there you have the cartridge. All it needs now is to be lubricated, which I'll show you in the next step. Okay, so now we're at the lubrication stage, which is the final stage in the process. What we have here is some molten beef dripping or tallow, and here we have the standard Enfield bullet lube of 4 parts tallow to 1 part beeswax. Now the stove is not hot, it's cold at the moment, so this is just for demonstration purposes. So here's the cartridge. First we're going to dip the base wad into the pure tallow just up to the top of it. Sizzles a bit. Not sure if you can see that. That's now been dipped. And then I'm going to take some pliers and I'm just going to gently hold the bullet by its base because at this point the bullet could still drop out because it's not a bit super tight wrap around it, but the lube I'm going to dip it in will do the job of keeping it all together quite well. So again, I'm going to dip it into the tallow and beeswax mix just to the base of the bullet and no further. There you go, I'll just dab it there on a bit of paper, and then you can simply pop it somewhere to stand up, like I use a block of wood, and let it dry. And after that, it's good to go. So there you have it. Proof that you can go from this to this, from the Enfield muzzle loading cartridge to a Calisher Terry breech loading cartridge. And the only extra components you need are a felt wad and a card disc. Thank you for joining me today for this little foray into experimental archaeology, and I'll see you next time.